Springfield's Talk 1041. Hey, everyone. Welcome. Good Monday. My name is Nick Reed. Sarah Myers is here.
Hi.
You don't sound like you've got a real chipper morning going on this way.
I'm trying new things out with our cameras, and
Oh, are you?
the moment I put my headphones on, I ripped one of the cameras off of the stand.
No.
So Oh no.
Real train wreck this morning.
Let's start over.
Let's just start it all over. We are streaming live. You can watch the actual show, hence the reference to the cameras there, on YouTube. Go to Springfield's Talk 1041. And if you just want to listen to audio, of course, then you can do that. KSGF.com, the app, probably other places as well. So we try to make it as convenient as absolutely 100% possible. Friday, one of the big breaking news items was Don Lemon being indicted by a grand jury for terrorizing those churchgoers up in Minneapolis. And suddenly he has gone from activist to, oh no, I was just a journalist covering this. That's all. And the arrest has also exposed just the complete and utter ignorance of so many people on the left. I've seen the virtue signaling posts, as many of you may have as well, of people that it goes back. George W. Bush didn't arrest Dan Rather for criticizing him, and it goes through all these lists of presidents who didn't arrest journalists. And then there's Donald Trump. There have been a lot of journalists arrested, and their sources, particularly under the Obama administration. Now, Biden had 8 journalists arrested that were just filming the events as journalists in the Capitol on January 6th. So for a lot of truth-seeking people, this is the exhaustive portion of it. And frankly, media, this is another opportunity for you to demonstrate that you are not dishonest. And that is to give some sort of historical context, as the narrative here is that this is some new frightening fascist move by a dictator. Oh, look at this. Now Trump's arresting journalists, something that's never been done before. Well, first off, it was a grand jury. But if you're a responsible news outlet, what you do is you note the number of journalists and their sources that have been arrested and indicted under previous administrations. Now, it doesn't mean that every situation is the same. It is not. In fact, we're going to talk a little bit about what it is that Don Lemon is his own worst enemy. Virtually every bit of evidence that is going to be presented, I imagine, of his guilt is his own words in his own videotaping. And we'll play some of the audio because you may not have seen the video that he filmed, but in the video, he talks about how they are going to go into the church, that he's tried to play a little coy subsequent to the event and some of the backlash on, like, well, I didn't really know what was going to happen. He says, he's like giving little sneak previews to everyone to get the audience excited that we're getting ready to go in there. We don't know what's going to happen. Like, oh, this is all exciting. And then at one point, and I think it's something that's gotten overlooked, he is outside the church talking to the cameras, and he references the fact that he had either had the cameras turned off or was turning them off because of discussions that were going on amongst those who infiltrated the church that he did not want to be heard because it may damage what it is that they're trying to do, essentially their plan. And he acknowledges that. He said, sorry, we had to shut off the cameras, and we'll play the audio. So for a journalist that was just covering things, it's very interesting that he acknowledged he deliberately wasn't covering some of the conversations that the so-called protesters were having because he wasn't acting as a journalist. There's this apparent need to also address, and you would think that the media would lead this, That freedom of press doesn't mean you get to violate a law, particularly a federal law. And as long as you're recording it, that gives you a get out of jail free card. If you know that there is going to be a bank robbery and you begin filming it ahead of time and you acknowledge that you know what's getting ready to happen and you go into the bank with the robbers and you are, there filming everything, and you don't get to say, oh, well, I was filming it, so that means that I shouldn't be held accountable for breaking into a bank. Or if you know that there's going to be some sort of physical attack by individuals, and you are doing some sort of report on gangs, and you know that the gangs have a hit out on some rival gang, and that they are going to seek out and execute that person, and you go along with them, filming it, knowing what is about to happen, and then you film the execution or even participate in it, but then say, oh, well, I was filming it, and I'm an online journalist, so that means I get to break that law. That's not what freedom of the press is. Freedom of the press does not mean you have super immunity and you can do anything you want, break any law that you want, and you're protected because you say you're a journalist. That's not how that works. But apparently, again, people on the left don't really seem to recognize or understand this, and you would think that it would be the media that would want their audience to make sure that they, as media, understood this. You would want to position yourself to your audience as credible enough to understand the very basics of the freedom of press, given that you are members of the press, yet that is oddly absent from any of this reporting. We should have Congressman Burleson with us also in the 7 o'clock hour. Weather coming up in a moment as we are looking for brighter and warmer days, today being one of them. Right now, the latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 51. Tonight, mostly cloudy with a low around 33. For your Tuesday, partly sunny with a high near 43. And for Wednesday, mostly sunny with a high near 39.
All right. So Don Lemon, indicted by a grand jury for terrorizing Christians at worship, and suddenly the left is, of course, gravely concerned that as long as you are a left-wing journalist, you know, even if you're not actually being paid, you're not working for anyone. In fact, your last journalism job, you got fired for, among other things, claiming women in their, 40s or 50s were, quote, past their prime. This is, I love it, these people, once again, that the left choose to make their great heroes. The party of women are rallying around a guy who once declared that middle-aged women were, quote, past their prime, and when challenged on it by two women anchors on CNN, he told them to Google it. So, of course, it makes sense that the left is going to rally around this guy who has also been accused of sexual assault. So it's a great combination for the left to champion. Of course, it was a couple of weeks ago. He stormed a church, a Christian church, that he would refer to as a group of white supremacists, and then played the "I was just a journalist covering a story" card. Well, the problem is that's not what was happening. Now, first off, it needs to be understood. The act itself of disruption in a church is a violation of federal law. This is a FACE Act. And incidentally, for all of you lefties like, well, of course, Donald Trump would sign something in to protect white supremacist Christians, pass that into law so that there could be no criticisms of Christianity. This was a law signed in by President Bill Clinton. It was passed by a Democrat-controlled House of Representatives, and it was passed by a Democrat-controlled Senate. Now, for those of you who may be confused as to why a Democrat-controlled government in the 90s would pass something protecting Christians, it was intended to protect people that wanted to go in and get abortions. But churches were put in there as well. This is something that I think it was Orrin Hatch, who was at the time a senator from Utah. I think he spearheaded it, saying, well, listen, if we're going to give people who want to go in and, kill their babies these protections, maybe we should give people who want to worship God the same protections. And Democrats were like, yeah, sure, that's fine, no problem at all. Well, now it's coming back to bite them. Democrats in the 90s probably did not foresee a future in which their supporters would be storming Christian churches to terrorize parishioners. But the day has come. And now, as usual, when the left comes upon a law that they don't like, aka one that they want to break, it just shouldn't be enforced. Should not be enforced. And when it comes to Don Lemon and some of these other violators of the FACE Act, this is an example of that. Well, how dare they do this? How dare the law be enforced? The law that our party passed in the 90s. The disruption of the service itself is the crime, and Don Lemon participated in that. And he actively participated in it, getting in the face of the pastor. So he wasn't observing a crime. This isn't somebody that was standing on the outside, watching it play out. Once he went in through the doors, the crime was committed. Freedom of the press does not mean freedom to break laws. Pretty basic stuff. Now, I thought I'd play some audio of his actual footage because many of you may not have heard it, and I think he's going to be his own demise here because of his own video stream, in which he's explaining that he knew he was going to be going into the church, which is a violation of the law. He clearly knew that people were being terrorized. You'll hear audio of him describing the scene, people cowering in terror. And then you'll also hear him acknowledge that at some point he turns off the cameras in order to help the stormers of the church keep their plotting secret. He did not want it to go out over the air. So he was an active participant in not reporting what they were actually planning on doing next or their strategy. So here is the audio. This is the first bit of audio in which he is in the vehicle getting ready to storm the church with the others.
I can't see anything on. It's okay. I got this card. Twitch, we're back. Sunday morning church.
Yeah. Okay. We'll see. After we do this operation, you'll see it live. And these operations are surprise operations. Again, can't tell you where they're going. Okay. So I am going inside now. Where's my phone? I need my phone.
All right. So there he's acknowledging he knows ahead of time he's going inside. There's some attempts to muddy the water and to claim, he didn't know what was going to happen. He had no idea they were going to storm the church. He just decided to somehow he got hooked up with these people, totally random. Maybe he's just driving along and saw a bunch of people walk into a church and thought, well, this looks interesting. I wonder what's going on. Let's observe. He referred to it as an operation. That he knew, as he said, we are getting ready to go in the church. That also and some of this is going to be harmful, I imagine, legally for Don Lemon, but it also defies much of the false narrative that Democrats tried to push out there. And one of the narratives is that, they didn't storm the church. No, they were already in there. Like when church started, they went in ahead of time just like everyone else and then decided to get up and start trying to hold people accountable for supporting Nazis. You can hear there. That is not what was occurring. In much of the video, Don Lemon recognizes that people within the church are being terrorized. Here is some of his description during his live stream.
Like the First Amendment is about the freedom to protest. I'm sure people here don't like it, but protests are not comfortable. And there are people here I'm looking at a young man who's in the corner. He's frightened. He's scared. He's crying. People are leaving church. One of the members who looks to be really upset, a young person, the pastor's trying to calm him down over there.
All right. So he clearly knew, and with a coldness, observing people in fear, terrorized, as if they're not human. Yeah, there's somebody over there cowering in fear. We can see somebody over there. Just no sympathy, no humanity. According to the statements of some of the victims inside the church, they were literally separated from their children. That there was a nursery. Many of the parents went to try to get their children because many of them told law enforcement they just thought the shooting was going to start any minute because, particularly in Minnesota, there have been church shootings, left-wing activists that have gone into churches and shot and killed people. The most latest high-profile incident in Minnesota, the shooter took out a couple of kids. And so parents began scrambling to go try and get their children from the children's area where they're having Sunday school or nursery, depending on the age of the kids. And they were blocked by these left-wing activists. The doorway to getting their children, they were blocked from getting their children. This was not, as the Democrats want to portray it and the media want to portray it, some just peaceful protest that this is what the First Amendment's all about. This is not what that's kidnapping. When you prevent people from leaving a facility, when you block doorways in which people are trying to exit, when you block children into a room and you don't allow their parents to get to them, to me, that has to at least come close to falling under the legal definition of kidnapping. That's not the First Amendment does not give Don Lemon, because he poses as some journalist, or even if you want to count him as being a journalist, to participate in violating federal laws, including terrorizing, by his own acknowledgement, women and children and families, and keep parents from getting to their children. The left has become so tyrannical. Now here Lemon is, wait, is this the audio? Let me see let's start this.
They look like MAGA coded.
All right, so this is audio after they have exited at one point the church, and he's talking about how a number of the folks that he infiltrated the church with are white. And it's almost like he's apologizing for it. He wants to make sure people understand why it is that the white people are essentially useful idiots. He doesn't use that term, but they had to get white people, in order to make the messaging and more palatable to the American people. But what he says at the end about the reason they shut off the cameras for a moment is what is very telling.
But there's a reason they have so many white people here. I'm just going to be honest. It's because of the operation that they're doing today. It's important to have allies, as they said, white allies here. So that is what I could say. I turned our camera off of them because they're giving some critical information here.
So that, I think, also is definitely, I would imagine, being used against his argument that he was simply there as an observer. He acknowledged he turned off the cameras so that they could give some critical information, like they were talking and sharing information about, that whatever it is, their strategy, their plan, their coordinated messaging, whatever it is. And he was protecting them. Now, that also defies the notion that he was simply there to observe and to film and cover what was going on. Why would you not cover that part of it? If you are a journalist that is not actively participating in the violation of federal law, why did you turn the camera off when the people that were committing the federal crime here, were talking amongst themselves about aspects of what it was that they were doing? That, to me, seems like something that a journalist would cover. He clearly was just as much of a participant as every one of these other individuals violating the FACE Act. He was not acting as a journalist. But secondly, even if he were, that does not give him some sort of magical get-out-of-jail-free card. Because the First Amendment does not mean, since you're a journalist, you can violate federal laws, and as long as you film it or record the audio or take notes, you're good to go. Particularly, and let's be honest, given that there really isn't an official definition of a journalist. And by the way, the left tried to years ago, or at least they talked about putting into law what was considered a journalist for the purposes of freedom of speech, which is a horrible idea, because then you have government deciding who gets to be protected, what constitutes a journalist according to their opinion, according to their assessment. And so we live in a world where essentially anyone who is reporting can be considered to be a journalist that is reporting information, and I would argue that's pretty consistent with the days of the founding of this nation. And if you want to believe what the left is currently claiming in the context of Don Lemon, and that is as long as you're reporting on it while you do it, that means any criminal who films what crime they're committing, they can say, well, I was just being a journalist. That's all. I was just covering the crime. Doesn't work that way. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. All right, your chance to get signed up. A brand new lunch bunch with our good friends at Godfather's Pizza, specifically their Springfield location with the buffet and salad bar. Get signed up at ksgf.com, and if you win, you and up to you don't have to bring 5 with you if you don't want to. It could just be you. It could be 3 people, 4 people. You understand the concept. But you can bring up to 5 additional folks. Join Sarah and me on Wednesday for all you can eat Godfather's Pizza and Salad Bar. And that entry registration, again, is available at ksgf.com.
Springfield's Talk 1041, the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by J&S Automotive. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 51. Tonight, mostly cloudy with a low around 33. For your Tuesday, partly sunny with a high near 43. And for Wednesday, mostly sunny with a high near 39.
A couple other points that I want to make regarding the narrative around Don Lemon. And I'll start here just to get one of the Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line messages in, noting that the amendments to the Constitution do not provide protection to journalists. It provides freedom of the press. This means you can publish your opinions publicly. It provides for zero protection for actions taken during what you perceive as your job. It's about expression, not action. And this is accurate. The freedom of the press, the concept is, hey, if you're a reporter, you're reporting whatever that looks like, whatever the definition. I mean, essentially, to me, any American that is putting information down in a format for the purposes of providing information to other people, that's being a journalist. Whether you are, and I know some people would disagree with this, particularly people who go to journalism school. But, and you look back in the founding days and the ideas behind these protections, and it's just a person that is providing information to the general public about things that are going on. With the internet, this has become something that essentially anyone can now do. And the protections are there to note that government cannot come in and punish you for doing this. And to the point of the person texting, what it doesn't say is, oh, by the way, you can also just violate laws as long as you report on yourself doing it while you're doing it. And that is your get out of jail free card. That is not, that's not what that is. And I know it seems painfully ridiculous that has to be explained, but that's the position that the left is coming from. And by the way, the same media that just, 4 or 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, that were ripping on Nick Shirley up in Minneapolis for doing real journalism and exposing billions and billions of stolen taxpayer dollars at these so-called daycare centers. They were dismissing him and ripping him as not a real journalist. Well, he doesn't have, just because he's filming something and putting it on the internet doesn't mean he's a journalist. Well, that's what Don Lemon did. He's not working for anybody other than clicks, downloads, and views. The difference between what Don Lemon did and what Nick Shirley did is, one, Nick Shirley wasn't violating federal laws while he was doing it, and two, what Nick Shirley did clearly was a service to the public that had billions of their taxpayer dollars stolen. The other narrative that is going around is that this is Trump, that he's just more of his violations, and here he is, he's a dictator. And, past presidents, I've seen a listing that lists, George Bush didn't arrest Dan Rather, Bill Clinton didn't arrest this person, Barack Obama didn't arrest this journalist. There were a lot of journalists. And there's sources arrested and prosecuted under, among other, Democrat presidents. In fact, before Donald Trump was sworn in the first time, there was a story. This is ABC, actually the affiliate out of Australia. Trump support. Let's get to that one next. Okay, Obama used this is Freedom Press, freedom.press. It's a journalist website. Obama used the Espionage Act to put a record number of reporters' sources in jail, and Trump could be even worse. So, of course, this was before Trump was sworn in, and this was the media that was trying to describe how scary and bad Trump was going to be by saying, you know how bad Obama was when it came to violations of freedom of the press? You wait, we think Trump's going to be worse. And it talks about the use by the Obama administration of the Espionage Act of 1917 with historic numbers to go after journalists and their sources. The Freedom.Press at the time noted the Obama administration was determined to change that, talking about the lack of use of the Espionage Act against journalists. Writing, under pressure from Congress and intelligence agencies, Attorney General Eric Holder directed the Department of Justice to aggressively prosecute government employee sources who discussed information with reporters. In a 2012 Afternews Organization's report on U.S. drone strikes and attempts to disable Iranian nuclear reactors, Holder assigned 2 U.S. attorneys to track down the journalists' sources. President Obama strongly supported Holder's war against journalist sources, despite once promising to protect whistleblowers when in office and running for president on the nation's security scandals of the Bush administration, misdeeds that became public only because of leaks. The story went on to note during the Obama administration, the Department of Justice brought charges under the Espionage Act against 8 people accused of leaking to the media. 2 other high-ranking Obama officials, Petraeus and Cartwright, were also prosecuted as part of leak investigations. They both ultimately pled to lesser charges and were never indicted under the Espionage Act. Cartwright was also later pardoned, including their cases. The total number of leak case prosecutions under Barack Obama was 10. The Obama administration was also known for spying on journalists. Cheryl Atkinson, at the time of CBS News, was one of those journalists who became a whistleblower against the Obama administration for the spying. And she wasn't the only one. So this idea, and some of you folks on the left probably buy into it because you live in an echo chamber. This idea that someone like Obama, the great president, the greatest we ever had, never would do so. Yeah, he took it into overdrive. Back to the fact that the media only really cares about what they claim is freedom of the press. And Don Lemon is a journalist, even though he doesn't work for anyone. And again, I gave my definition of journalist earlier, but we're talking about the way that the mainstream media covers this stuff. This is a story from after January 6th. Trump supporters claim to be journalists as they fight criminal charges relating to Capitol riot. This is after the Biden administration charged 8 journalists in the riots / protests / whatever you want to call them. At least 8 people charged in the January 6th riot have identified themselves as journalists or a documentary filmmaker, including 3 people arrested this month alone, according to an Associated Press review of court records in nearly 400 federal cases. In the U.S., this is an ABC piece out of Australia. In the U.S., free speech is constitutionally protected by the First Amendment, but it's unclear if this will bolster the legal defenses of those charged with participation in what authorities say was an attempted insurrection, though no one would be charged with insurrection. While the internet has given more people a platform to use their voice, the definition of a journalist is not that broad when put into practice in court, said the dean of the University of Maryland's Philip Merrill College of Journalism. She said it is an easy case to make that Capitol riot defendants were not journalists because they would have official media accreditations to work in the building on that day. So you can see, of course, how this works, and we're accustomed to it. Whenever you have journalists, by the same standard that Don Lemon is one, that are arrested, 8 of them, for being in the Capitol on January 6th and filming what is occurring, See, they don't count as journalists because, well, they haven't been accredited. See, they don't have press passes. These aren't individuals that work for anyone. That's not a journalist. Don Lemon, same situation, and he is the definition of a journalist. Same old, same old. And yet again, another chapter in why people recognize you cannot trust the media in this country, the mainstream elite media in this country. I wanted to read what Mark had to say, a review regarding his experience at Pinnaker Honda. Just wanted to say the staff at Pinnaker Honda were great. They made the purchase quick and easy with no pressure. We went in 10 minutes before closing, but we still did not feel rushed. We purchased a 2026 Honda Passport Trail Sport Elite, and it has been great. It has so much technology and additional options. We definitely made the right choice. We highly recommend Pinnaker Honda for your next purchase. And maybe when you get that tax refund, some of you are going to be a little surprised, according to the Trump administration, because of the fact that there was a retroactive component to the big, beautiful bill that may result in people getting more of a refund than they thought, or you may have it worked out to where it comes out zero. You don't owe anything, you don't get anything back, but you may find that you do because of that. Some people will, some people won't. But whatever the situation, might be a good time to visit Pinnaker Honda. Have a little something for a down payment. Bring those monthly payments down. And it doesn't even have to be a brand new vehicle. It could be one of their certified pre-owned vehicles. Don't forget the Pinnaker Advantage. 20% off routine maintenance when you buy from Pinnaker Honda, one of the many perks. You can find them South Campbell, just south of Walnut Lawn. Also, Nick's endorsements at KSGF.com. Left-wing activists stormed an event at a Jewish temple in New York this week while Democratic Rep Tom Souza was speaking. The left-wing activist protested his vote in favor of government spending bill that included increasing funding for immigration and custom enforcement. The demonstrators, affiliated with the activist group Climate Defiance, interrupted the congressman Wednesday night at the temple on Long Island, unleashing a barrage of crude theatrics and profane insults, according to the New York Post. Climate Defense posted to X, "We confronted Congressman Tom Souza. He was one of 7 Democrats casting the decisive vote to increase ICE funding by $10 trillion or billion dollars. Hideous, grotesque, fascist-loving coward. This man has blood on his hands. We will not forgive and we will not forget." Video of the disruption, which has amassed millions of views online, shows activists heckling the congressman with props such as adult diapers and knee pads while mocking his support for additional funding for the Department of Homeland Security. One demonstrator taunted the congressman by holding up an adult diaper, saying, "I know you voted to increase ICE funding, so I wanted to get something for you. This is an adult diaper for when you pee yourself in front of Donald Trump." Doesn't the left have the most articulate and really deep intellectual arguments? He went on to say, "You're the type of leader we need right now, someone who soils themselves when the fascists are at our door," says the person who conspired with others to storm a Jewish house of worship. Now, you're probably not, well, many of you did not even know that this occurred. And part of the reason is because, Don Lemon has a lot of followers, while as the individual who posted the video of these left-wing activists storming a synagogue doesn't have so many. So you're going to get some outlets that, of course, Town Hall, Daily Caller, Newsmax, Fox News, that may report on this, but the mainstream isn't going to, because they're in tune enough to recognize that it will make a segment of the population that isn't necessarily MAGA America a bit uncomfortable when Democrat activists start storming Christian churches and Jewish synagogues. So now, of course, if it was a bunch of white MAGA people that were doing this at all black churches and it was for political purposes, this would be domestic terrorism. They would demand these people go to prison for decades, and it would be lead story all over the place. But because it's Democrat activists, and in the minds of the media, well, they're kind of right. No outrage, and in some instances, lack of coverage. Ozark's elder law not planning at all is not. It's not just not planning. It's planning for bad things, whether you know it or not. Government decides where your stuff goes. How do you think that's going to go? No medical power of attorney. Got trouble there. Guess who makes those medical decisions for you or your loved one? Let's say you have a teenager that is in their senior year and they turn 18 years old and there is some sort of accident and medical decisions need to be made. Guess who has the legal right, unless you have planned this out ahead of time, to make those decisions? Government. What do you mean? This is my child. They're still a senior in high school. They live at home. They're dependent on me. They're 18 years old. They're a legal adult. That's why one of the things Lori Rook has talked about, and she said on her son's 18th birthday, this was one of the things that they did as part of that birthday day, got all of that paperwork taken care of so that any sort of decisions, be it medical or financial, that would have to be made in case he was no longer able to do that he decided ahead of time so that government wasn't the ultimate authority in those decisions. And even those of you that just really love government, I know there may not be a lot of you listening, but some of you are like, well, I really secretly love government. You still want them making those decisions for you? 10 area locations, a consultation's free. OzarksElderLaw.com. You can find Ozarks Elder Law info under Nick's endorsements at KSGF.com. Apparently, Puxatawny Phil said, 6 more weeks of winter.
Boo.
You know what I think would just be hilarious is if ever there was one of these mini events in which Puxatawny Phil or the groundhog, and because you have the different variations of this take place in different communities across the country. If there was a prediction of 6 more weeks of winter, and then somebody just walked up on stage with a shotgun and blew him away.
Stop.
Can you imagine the crowd with bits of groundhog all over, horrified children?
We're going to get emails from PETA. I just know it.
Yeah, that's just fine. They can forward them to former Mayor de Blasio, who still favorite Groundhog Day. Every Groundhog Day I bring it up when old Mayor de Blasio, Democrat mayor of New York, dropped and killed Puxatawny Phil, or the groundhog. Because Puxatawny Phil is specifically the groundhog in Puxatawny, right? All the others are just groundhogs. But he dropped. And it wasn't just an instant death, if I remember right. It was a slow, painful death that came later. Yeah, you didn't hear a lot from, and I don't know, they may have complained about that. I'm not sure. But if that wasn't the perfect symbolism of de Blasio as mayor of New York, I don't know that I know what is. Congressman Burleson, in the upcoming hour, we've got news in 60 seconds. I'm Nick Reed. What one of the quotes that Ronald Reagan is known for is was it the 12 most or 10 most dangerous, frightening words in the English language, and that's, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. And there's absolute truth in this. Now, some people may perceive that as government coming and they're trying to deliberately mislead you, and they're trying to catch you and say, oh, no, don't worry, we're just we just need to look around. But in a broader scale, what it meant is anytime government, even if it like the genuine intent is to help, the people that they target to help are the ones that always get harmed. This is always the case. With remarkable frequency. One of the latest examples is Mayor Mamdani. And all the way back, there's been this long-standing policy in New York City that goes back to the days of Mayor Ed Koch, Democrat. And it has, as a policy, transcended political party. And that is when the temperatures get brutally cold, for the safety of homeless people who refuse to get off the streets, you make them get off the streets and get into shelter. And Mamdani thinks that is a cruel policy because it's used in order to tell the homeless what they can or cannot do, and that this should only be as a last resort. So he changed the policy. Well, as of last week, 13 homeless people died being frozen to death because of his policy. The policy of compassion for the homeless. This is the standard Democrat playbook. And frankly, standard government playbook, particularly when it comes to domestic policies. And that is, okay, who is it we're trying? Oh, we're going to help the homeless here by this new policy. And what's the result? 13 dead homeless people that otherwise would not have died. There are a couple of different stories on this, and one of them is in the New York Post, noting that even after it became clear his policy was killing off homeless people, he stubbornly stuck to his guns. This is the compassion of the left. See, you think that Democrats lack compassion when it comes to the actual results that cause damage to the people? Socialism's worse, and this is laid out right in front of us. Mayor Mamdani said Friday he will still only force homeless New Yorkers off the street as a last resort. Apparently them dying off, freezing to death isn't a last resort. I don't know what last resort is. If there's a number, does it have to be 100 homeless human beings? 1,000? So he stuck to his guns Friday, saying he will only force homeless New Yorkers off the street as a last resort, even as his office admitted 13 people have now died outdoors. The Democratic Socialists continue to insist that city workers will compel homeless people to get indoors only if they pose a danger to themselves or others. He dug in his heels as the real field temperatures were forecast to dip as low as below zero Saturday into Sunday. Pressed on how city workers will determine if someone is a danger to themselves, Mamdani said numerous factors need to be taken into account before getting someone into a shelter, including whether they have enough clothing on. Now, this is typical socialism. See, people aren't actually people. People are just these entities that exist by way of government checklist. No common sense, no humanity checklist. He said, quote, there are a number of specific criteria that is used in determining whether one is a danger to themselves or others, he told reporters at an event in Long Island City. Quote, I think we can find some of this criteria also in how an individual is clothed, whether they are deemed to actually be warm in those settings, as well as their behavior. Now, see, the normal person common sense way is it's cold as hell. This clearly is dangerous. We need to get them off the street. No, no, no. See, that's not big government. We got to get out Form 82A, subsection B, section 7 through 12 here, and make sure that so many check marks are checked off in order to determine whether or not this person needs to come in out of the cold. This, incidentally, is how medicine is increasingly becoming in our country as well, which is one of the many problems that we have. He went on to say, and for the New Yorkers who are deemed to be a threat to themselves or to others, there is a process of involuntary confinement, which is a last resort. However, it has been utilized a number of times whenever city workers have come to that conclusion. Hours later, his office announced that the outdoor death toll had tragically risen 3 since last Saturday, when the Big Apple began getting walloped by unrelenting below-freezing conditions and Winter Storm Fern. City Hall spokesperson said in a statement the number of deaths had increased to 13, up from 10. The mayor's office didn't provide any additional details about the 3 newly deaths, and it wasn't known when that had taken place. One of the individuals who was killed by the cold, Frederick Jones, 67, who was formerly homeless, found dead Saturday morning in Midtown, about a mile from his government-subsidized apartment building, the outlet reported. Cops were called twice about Jones on Friday by people concerned he might die because of the blizzard and the extreme cold conditions. But he refused help the first time, and he did not meet Mayor Mamdani's list of criteria for involuntary removal, so he was left to die. A court-appointed guardian told New York Post, quote, "I'm just in shock. He should not have been outside." Michael Veronica, 44, who was found dead Saturday morning outside a building in Brooklyn near Warren Street, who appeared to be homeless. His family said he likely died alone in the freezing cold from a drug overdose after years of substance abuse, but again, did not meet the Mamdani criteria for danger to himself, so left to die. What a wonderful, all of these young socialists that are just voting for compassion, voting for a better life for everyone, and it's already resulted in such compassionate deaths, people dying alone in the streets, when common sense clearly dictates that their lives are in danger, but Mamdani sitting on his bidet in Gracie Mansion, writing up a list of his criteria for when someone's life is in danger. They're just homeless people. Look at it this way. He can now take credit for cutting down the number of homeless people in New York City. Socialist version of success. Weather in a moment. Right now, the latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 51. Tonight, mostly cloudy with a low around 33. For your Tuesday, partly sunny skies with a high near 43. And taking a look at Wednesday, mostly sunny with a high near 39.
Congressman Burleson joining us this morning. How are you, sir?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. Were you up all night watching the Grammys?
You know me. No, I didn't know there was a Grammys. That's how
I
much
know.
I pay attention to that.
Yes, increasingly it seems to become irrelevant to people. I mean, really to the point, I didn't know it was on either until I think I was flipping through. I was like, oh, the Grammys are on tonight. It just seems more and more irrelevant. Though a lot of them, I guess, articulated their very deep analytical perspective on world events by yelling things like F ICE and, that sort of stuff. Once again, providing an insight to the American people that really gives them something to chew over.
Well, to me, it's like the whole, the idea that you've got all these elitists and they think that we will enjoy watching them receive awards.
That they give each other.
That they give each other and then tell us how to live our lives. The only thing worse would be if politicians had an award show.
That is so true. That is so absolutely true. Part of what really kills me about these events in which they rail against ICE enforcing our borders is the fact that it is difficult to find any events in this country that have greater security than events like the Grammys. And these are people that you cannot get in or out of that unless you show your identification. If you do somehow manage to get in without identification, the celebrities expect that security will throw you out. And the hypocrisy of people whose own shows, their own concerts, their own awards show require to have some of the greatest security to make sure only people who are supposed to be there are there, for them to then use those venues to demonstrate that we as normal Americans, we don't have that same right to expect when it comes to our borders, because we don't get the fancy security they get. We don't get the gated communities they get. We have our border, and expect us and demonize us for simply wanting to have that same benefit of security that they are allowed to have because of their wealth. It's just appalling.
Yeah. They live in a bubble. They have no idea. And they're the way in which they're just pampered with all these. It's not enough to get the awards. They have to get all these bags of gifts.
Oh yeah.
That are worth thousands and thousands of dollars.
Congressman Burleson with us. All right, so explain, if you would, what has been going on since we talked to you last week when it comes to certain aspects of the budget passed with, you get a little bit of crossover between Democrats and Republicans and then still potential partial shutdown. What is the landscape today?
Yeah, you ever heard of the expression, if you lie with dogs, you get ticks?
Yes.
Well, that's what the Republicans did when they took on all these Democrat earmarks that Chuck Schumer had asked them to take. So the bill that the Senate told us that the only way to get it through the Senate is to take all these Democrat earmarks. And I think we talked about that last week, how bad they were. You had dozens of earmarks for, over 24 that went to gender affirming care clinics. You had one that went to a late-term abortion clinic. There's $5 billion that went towards refugee resettlement funds. So here we are. It's like Republicans are not really fulfilling the campaign promises, but they voted for it because they said, well, that's the only way we're going to be able to get it through and not shut down the government. We get it over there, and Chuck Schumer says, "Oh, we're still shutting down the government." And the only way for you the only thing we'll allow to pass is if you strip out Homeland Security from this bill, and we'll give you a 2-week we'll give you 2 weeks on Homeland. We'll negotiate in the meantime. Now, I don't know about you, and I don't, maybe I'm not the best strategist, but that doesn't seem like a very good strategy to set yourself up where you've passed and given them everything.
Yeah.
And then the one thing that they don't want and that you want, you're going to put off for 2 weeks and have nothing to leverage, nothing to negotiate. So now you're going to be, in 2 weeks, we will be at the mercy of Chuck Schumer and what their view of the way in which Homeland Security should be conducted. and that's it. And that's why I just think it's very foolish to put yourself in that situation.
This is going to be somewhat repetitive because you and I have had these conversations on air before, and it's this is why Republicans lose. The people who are the activists that I don't even mean activists necessarily politically, but they're paying attention. The Republicans that are the base that the party needs to get out during the midterms. Whenever these things happen, it frustrates, it angers, it makes those voters feel like, what is the point in even getting out to vote if when Republicans are in charge, Democrats still are in charge? And I think the irony is so many of these Republicans that are weak-kneed and pathetic think that they're doing it in order to increase the likelihood of keeping power. Like, well, it looks like we don't want to look like we're shutting down the government. We don't want to look like we're doing this. We don't want to, and they allow Democrats to scare them into being spineless, which is such a turnoff to the base, and it's part of the reason they lose. And it's just, I don't understand how they don't get that.
Yeah, well, like this last shooting that occurred in Minnesota. Well, first of all, politics 101 is that you say when something like that happens, until you have all the facts, you really shouldn't say anything. Just don't open your mouth. But then at the end of the day, we do not need to be running away from a topic that the American people voted us and voted this president to do. They voted in, an agenda to remove illegal immigrants from this country, period. And the fact that you have protesters coming in and attacking law enforcement, that's not something we should back away from. It's never okay to attack someone that's in law enforcement, whether you're armed or unarmed. And if you're armed, then you're increasing the risk. So, I mean, that's just logic. But instead of making those statements and holding your ground, many of my colleagues started going to Twitter and going to all these, talk shows and saying, well, maybe we ought to investigate this, or I demand an investigation immediately. And they're placating to the left. And you think those protesters don't see those interviews and those tweets?
Yeah. I know it
and
encourages
celebrate
them.
that?
Yeah.
Because now I bet we could go to their message boards and see how they're celebrating when Republicans are caving.
Well, they use it for propaganda. They utilize it to bolster their case. And here's it's a conflation issue too, because what happens is they set the narrative to be, all right, you're either for ICE 100% of the time, no matter what happens, and the current immigration reform, or you acknowledge, like what they do is they say, if you acknowledge that this particular shooting had some problems, then that means that we should get rid of ICE. Well, that isn't the case either. And what unfortunately happens is you tend to have a lot of these Republicans that are weak-kneed, and instead of saying, hey, with any sort of shooting, yeah, you're going to have an investigation, but the one thing we need to do is wait to kind of see how it plays out. There's standard protocol in play here, but they shift automatically to, well, maybe we should pull ICE out of there after all. And that's where the real problem comes into play.
Right. You've given an opening.
Yep.
You've given them an opening, and they're just going to take it. And then they're going to ask for more. So,
well, and not to mention, it's insane to me to say that an entire division of anything, in this case government, should stop doing its job because of the action of one. Even if one wants to believe, yes, that was cold-blooded murder. I mean, how many times do you hear about firefighters in which, you get some story and it turns out some volunteer firefighter was actually lighting fires because he wanted to be a hero and go out and fight fires. Well, you don't then say, well, clearly we need to get all firefighters abolished. We can't have that anymore. You don't get rid of an entire operating arm of any sort of institution because you think one person did something that was outside of the realm of what they should have been doing. But that's the premise that they've created here.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, you've got TSA agents that are impacted here. So the poor people at the airport that are, just trying to get us to be able to, the country to keep on its feet, let people be able to travel. They have to now worry about their paycheck because Chuck Schumer wants to take it out on one individual or a group of people within ICE.
Well, not to mention some TSA agents have been chased down by anti-ICE agitators thinking that they were ICE. I mean, you hear virtually every form of security at some point have had its members mistaken for ICE agents and had to face these rioters because of it. So, those TSA agents.
I say treat them the way that they treated the J6ers. And if anything, especially if they did something violent, track them down and arrest them. Yeah. I think that Trump should send in all the other law enforcement agencies to defend ICE. Don't back down. And if somebody throws a brick, they should be immediately arrested and hauled off and charged. That's how you put an end to this.
I wanted to, because this is a very broad question, but I know it's one that you probably hear to some degree, and it was texted in saying, I'd like to ask our representative if during these first 2 years of Trump we can't balance the budget or even pass a budget in any form, is there ever a chance we'll get any conservative ideas accomplished? We're never going to get a better political situation for change, and we didn't seem to move the needle our way at all. I'm starting to have no hope. So your thoughts on that? I know that's a pretty broad,
The only time that I would say that we got a lot of wins was in one big beautiful bill. And it was because Freedom Caucus members really held the line. We burned almost all of our political capital and nearly melted down our relationship with the president and the speaker. And they hated us for several weeks because we forced them to do what Washington, to do something different than Washington normally does. We forced them to cut spending and to pass really good conservative legislation. And there was some of the things that were not overtly said, and as soon as it passed, have come out in the press now. For example, Olivia Beavers recently reported that the last minute agreement that my group had with Trump was that a commitment that they would not extend the enhanced Obamacare subsidies, that they would publicly oppose them when the time came to renew them. That was an agreement that we had made that was $500 billion savings to the deficit. In addition, we got an agreement that there would not be that the Green New Deal would, if it's going to be, that it would be completely shut down. And we got an executive order on that within like 2 weeks. So there was a lot of good things that were accomplished in that moment, but it's kind of fallen off the rails since then. Yeah. And I think that part of the reason is that, we were able to win the shutdown, but if you think about it, we won the shutdown because we had set up the stage so that in the shutdown, Trump couldn't, because he had made an agreement, they could not extend these subsidies. Mm-hmm. So I think that's why we were able to win that shutdown, but here we are right now. And I think, I don't know how to maneuver in such a way that we win this. Now, I'll give you the strategy quickly, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
What's happening right now is the bill has come back over. They're begging us to vote for this, and they're trying to get every Republican to vote for this bill. Well, I voted against it 2 weeks ago. The exact same language, voted against it. And now there's only 2 weeks of Homeland. I mean, there's no incentive, or this did not get better. It got worse. And so I don't know why they think that they're going to be able to get all the Republicans to vote for this. Originally, they were going to bring it up on suspension, which means you have to have 2/3 votes, and you're not allowed to change anything when you bring something up on suspension. So that would mean that they would have to get half of the Democrats and all the Republicans. But they realized that that's not going to happen. So they're now bringing it up under a rule, which means that they will allow amendments, supposedly allow amendments. Now we'll see. The Rules Committee is, the Rules Chairwoman, Virginia Fox, is going to be a pit bull, and she's going to try to fend off any and every amendment that she can. And what we're going to try to do is get the amendment to put the SAVE Act onto this package. So if the Democrats want to play games here, and they want to send us back, after a bill that and if they want to choke on their agreement, then that we have, in my opinion, we should put the SAVE Act on here. What SAVE Act is the bill that says that illegal immigrants cannot be counted in a census, and that people have to have a voter ID in order to vote in a federal election. And you've got, at the end of the day, you can only register a U.S. citizen to vote. So this is the only way we're going to save the country. In addition, it pretty much blocks all the vote by mail crap that was going on before. So we're going to throw that on there, and hopefully they leadership is going to freak out, but that's what needs to happen.
It's a demonstration of how far the Democrat Party has fallen. The fact that it's controversial to say you can't vote in this country if you aren't an American citizen, that you can't just walk up from Ecuador and on voting day and show up and vote, that is something that Democrats will be opposed to. It's just amazing how in the last couple of decades how far they've fallen as a party.
Right.
It's insane.
If we put this on there, if we're able to get it on there and send it over there, you're right. Let's make them have to defend their position that they don't want, that they want illegal immigrants to have to vote, or to be able to vote.
Yeah. Congressman Burleson, is always a great pleasure. Sure. Appreciate your time.
Yep. Have a great day.
All right. You do the same. Springfield's Talk 1041. I'm Nick Reed.
Springfield's Talk 1041, the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by J&S Automotive. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 51. Tonight mostly cloudy with a low around 33. For your Tuesday, partly sunny with a high near 43. And for Wednesday, mostly sunny skies with a high near 39.
Streaming live, KSGF.com. If you miss any of the show, don't worry about it. You can always go back and listen to it. We got the podcast section. at ksgf.com, also Spotify, iTunes. And then you can listen as you watch, going to our YouTube page, which is Springfield's Talk 1041. You can watch us live there as well, and that is Monday through Thursday when we are in studio. Fridays, we're out live at Scramblers, and so we're not really set up to do a video there. I wanted to share with you here, Kayla posting about Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty. If you're relatively new to the show, Emily Johnson, she is our absolute go-to. We recommend when it comes to buying homes, selling homes. Kayla said working with Emily was an absolute pleasure from start to finish. We've had the opportunity to both buy and sell properties with House Theory's help, and each experience exceeded our expectations. The deep knowledge of the market, strategic insights, keen eye for value truly made a difference every step of the way. Beyond the expertise, they were a genuine delight to work with. Professional, responsive, always looking out for our best interest. Another noting recently had the pleasure of working with Emily Johnson, top-notch realtor here in Springfield, and we could not have asked for a better experience or expertise. Professionalism, unwavering dedication truly did set her apart. She listened closely to our needs. She was patient with us during our extended home search, providing invaluable insights throughout Springfield, Nix, Ozark, Stratford, Willard, and Republic real estate market, helping us make informed decisions every step of the way. She even helped coordinate renovations, connecting us with excellent local contractors, making sure our new home was exactly how we envisioned it. Her strong negotiating skills saved us significant money, making the process seamless from beginning to end. We highly recommend Emily Johnson to anyone needing an exceptional realtor in Springfield. Yes, you definitely want her in your corner when it comes to buying or selling a home. Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty. There is a comedian by the name of Ben Bankas, Bankas, Ben Bankas. And he is he's what I would consider to be a more traditional comedian in the sense that he is not some left-wing nut. And he has had a number of his stand-up bits go viral because they are from a more conservative perspective. And one, they are funny, but two, it's something different. You know, part of the problem with the left is they become so redundant. You know, the Stephen Colberts, the Jimmy Kimmels, it's just like, oh, shock. I mean, it might as well be a rerun every single night when it comes to the monologue because the themes are the same. I mean, they're talking about current events, but, you know, so that changes, but it's just always the same. Trump is a Nazi. Trump supporters are Nazis. It's just the same tired stuff. So when you have someone that comes out and begins doing jokes from a more, you know, conservative or right-wing perspective, or dare I say just blue-collar, normal person perspective, the fact that it is not the same left-wing redundancy in and of itself makes it something that a lot of people enjoy watching. He had sold out some Minnesota shows because he's become very popular. And so he's not to the point of selling out big arenas like, you know, the Q or Great Southern Arena. But what bookings that he has had, particularly in comedy clubs, he's completely selling out. And a lot of this is because of these viral segments of his stand-ups that have been going around. And so he's gained a lot of popularity. And he has done a bit as of late talking about the killing of Renee Good. And the bit is surrounding her, and just to give you some of the quotes, and of course delivery is not going to be the same, but he says, "Now for a moment of silence for Renee Good," and the audience kind of laughs because they know what's coming, and he says, "Really hope that her dog is okay." He said, "Really hope that dog's okay," because, of course, she had a dog with her. But then he followed it up with, "and her pet." And so it was a lot of digs at her. making fun of her and the situation. And to the audience, very funny. And clearly, that sort of humor is resonating with a lot of people, hence the sold-out shows. Well, he's dealing with at least one cancellation because of his jokes. The Laugh Camp Comedy Club announced that it was canceling 6 of his sold-out shows. Bill Collins issuing a statement to People magazine that said, quote, after discussions with and concerns from public authorities, legal counsel, and staff, combined with heightened threats, increased media attention, and civil disorder, we have determined the risks and related liabilities cannot be overcome. Now, I'm not sure when he talks about risks and threat, does this mean that people on the left are threatening the comedy clubs? Does this mean that the peaceful protesters have become so dangerous that even in left-leaning Minneapolis, comedy shows have to be canceled? This isn't who we're told these people are. We're told that they're peaceful protesters. But there's a larger point here. And that is, once again, the hypocrisy of the left. The people who go on and on and on about the fact that despite actually losing the network tens of millions of dollars, Stephen Colbert should not be canceled. Jimmy Kimmel should not have been. Remember the when he made, well, it wasn't a joke, but he made false claims about the assassination of Charlie Kirk, falsely claiming that it was some right-wing conservative that killed him. And he was temporarily taken off air, and we were told that that is a sign of fascism. That simply because you might disagree with the content of some artist in America, that doesn't matter. Where are all of the left-wing activists to protest against the cancellation of this comedian show? You know what I think would be a great thing to do, what would be fantastic, is if there was a change. What is it? What are the? It's not GoFundMe, but whenever you.
Oh, the petition one? I think it is change.org.
Change.org. A petition to have Jimmy Kimmel have. Sorry, Steve Colbert or Jimmy Kimmel, both of them, to have this comedian on their show, not to debate, but to do his act. Let's see if these left-wingers that claim that they're opposed to fascism, opposed to silencing comedians because of the theme of the jokes they tell, if they will prove that by having Ben Bankus, who is a right-wing comedian who has had his shows canceled because of threats from apparently Democrat activists, will Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert have him as a guest to do his bit on their show? Will they do that? I'd love to see that change.org petition started. I think that it would probably get quite a bit of traction, signatures. It would probably go viral. I'll let somebody else, I guess anybody can set it up. Of course, we would be told, well, that's different, see. Well, of course it is. Because in the minds of the left, the rules apply differently. The rules are there to shield them, but not people who disagree with them politically. See, what he does, that's not free speech. That's hate speech, what he does. Calling federal agents, law enforcement, Nazis, and Gestapo, that's not hate speech. That's just the truth, see? So that's what the left does. They spread the truth. That's what freedom of speech is. Their perspective is authoritarian. And for all of the screaming about fascism, a term that people on the left clearly don't understand because they are the ones that demonstrate it on a daily basis. Springfield's Talk 1041, I'm Nick Reed. That article in the Springfield Daily Citizen that I was interviewed for, it did come out. It was a fine article. There were a couple of things that I would have liked to have been in there, but not putting them in there. I don't think it was any sort of ill intent or even necessarily a bad decision. It's just, a personal preference matter. And this was regarding last week when we were discussing the use of a taxpayer-funded facility, allowing anti-ICE folks to come together for the purposes of training on how it is to, rapid response. This is where generally the rapid response is to prevent them from doing their job by giving a heads up to people who might be on the run, that are evading capture. And the point is to try and make it as public as possible when and where they are in order to help those who are being sought, many of which might be wanted for murder or rape, to give them a heads up so they can escape. And whether that's, that sort of obstruction of justice is a good use of a taxpayer-funded facility. They, of course, felt that it was. And so there were just a couple of aspects of, like I said, the story. I probably would have added, and I was trying to say, there was one quote in particular that I felt it would have been nice to have had one of my quotes as a counter to it. But again, overall, it was fine. Now, apparently, so they held the event, and all of the so-called threats coming from pro-law enforcement people, pro-border security, none of that came to fruition. This is what we were told was very frightening and scary. I did find it interesting that the article noted that the library said that it had received a high number of calls, some of which have been inflammatory. Well, what does that mean? That's much different than threatening. See, this is part of I think a big problem we have is the allowance of people to make claims and then the expectations that we just believe the claim. And it was, presented to me that way, like, well, they've received all of these, horrific threats. And I'm thinking, how do you know? Oh, because they said so? Oh, okay. That's how that works? All you got to do is say it, and it means it's true. I found the headline for KY3 to be somewhat amusing. Springfield residents attend session that focuses on how to observe ICE activities. Oh, that's what it was, just to tell people how to watch them? The way that the headline describes it, it makes it sound like it's Eagle Days. at Lake Springfield, where once, what is it, in January, there's a day that you come out and you get to watch eagles. They show you how to observe them and where to see them. That's what's going on? That's what this is? I mean, what's next? Are we going to have meetings on how to observe parades? Like, now, for those of you who don't know how to watch things, we're going to get together and we're all going to have a meeting so we can tell you how it is to go and stand on the side of the road and observe a parade. Of course, an attempt to downplay. They said that it went so well that they plan on holding another one, which is, again, very weird given the frightening level of hostilities they claim that they were facing. And, I had a conversation with someone who isn't overtly political. I certainly don't think that they're a Trump supporter, but he was asking, I think somewhat rhetorically, but how it was that they didn't understand their hypocrisy, that their whole goal under the banner of free speech is to go out and cause disruptions. And when somebody else is doing it, though, just talking, not even going out to cause disruption, but just talking about the fact they're doing it, they want to shut that down. And he said, how do they not understand how hypocritical that is? Like, they are doing exactly what they claim they are fighting against. And I said, their brains just don't work that way, or they don't care. They're authoritarians who believe that everything should go their way, and there is no equality in this world, the equal application of freedom of speech and protest and so forth, that only applies to them. People they don't like, they will be the first ones to make sure that their freedom of speech is taken away if possible. That's just who these people are. And I just find it so disappointing, and frankly, it is sad to me that an event that is all about helping individuals who have cheated the system, instead of helping those who are trying to go through the system legitimately as immigrants. Apparently, they were very, very excited that they had the power and influence to bring people together through the community. So many, they couldn't accommodate all of them, that wanted to spend their time and effort helping assist people who have cheated our system. Why don't you use that power and influence to gather those same people together to help those who want to do it legally? There are a tremendous amount of people who come to this and who are in this very community, not just this country, but this community, that could use help, whether it's fundraising for money or study groups, or maybe they want to go to study groups, but they have kids, they need babysitters. There's so many ways to help the people who aren't cheating. Why would you not help them? And that's a question a lot of normal people ask themselves. There are, they apparently there's all, the goal is the same, and that is to be here in the country, but one says, okay, yeah, I want to do it the right way, and the other's like, screw those suckers, we'll cheat. And those are the people you want to help? Springfield's Talk 1041, I'm Nick Reed. Streaming live, KSGF.com. Hello, everyone. We are rolling into hour number 3. We'll talk about some more Epstein file releases. One of them is hilarious. The left is like, this witness says that she was raped by Donald Trump at this resort. It was a resort that hadn't been built until 10 years later. So, there's some problems with some of this. We'll have all that coming up. Springfield's Talk 1041. Hey, everyone, welcome. Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line. When Springfield public high schools allow students to walk out of class to protest ICE immigration policies, and the mayor's wife, that would be the Springfield mayor's wife, Mary Schrag, heads the State Department of Education Board, what else can you expect from Springfield voters, including Republican leaders? There is no debate. And this is some of the indoctrination in the schools. The fact that these schools are having no walkout in support of law enforcement tells you what you need to know. And I know for a fact that there are a lot of students that are supportive of enforcing our laws and believe in the democratic process. If you don't like a law, you don't riot until it gets ignored. You vote. But the culture and environment in our public schools is so hostile towards diversity of thought. And frankly, our republic, the democratic process of our republic, that if you don't like a law, there is a process we go through. It isn't demand that it be ignored. That it, and that though is the indoctrination. There's a video going somewhat viral of a school in New York. It's a preschool in which they're forcing kids to recite anti-ICE stuff. And it's so sickening to see. Going down the line to the kids and asking one kid, now, what is it that upsets you? And, I mean, you can see her physically coaching him. Oh, that they're coming and separating family or whatever the regurgitation is, and then having them all chant stuff like it's a cult. That's thank goodness we're working so hard to get that free pre-K for everyone in this, so government, in this country, so government can start on kids at even earlier age. Anytime that the Springfield public school system says, hey, we're just facilitating, free speech, it's not about the issue. It's always about a left-wing issue. It's always in opposition to the Constitution, be it the Second Amendment, or it's always in support of ignoring the laws we don't like. And by we, that means the left. I don't recall an environment that is open-minded and diverse enough in the Springfield School District encouraging pro-life students to have their walkouts, or walkouts whenever some left-wing lunatic shoots up a church, or like Don Lemon and his cohorts storm a Christian church, have walkouts in support of Christians not being harassed, not having to fear being shot in their own churches just for being Christians in America. Where are those walkouts? Isn't it amazing that these environments we're told are all about fostering protest and expressing one's free speech rights across the board, yet anytime it happens, it's always for left-wing causes? Are we to believe that that's a coincidence? You see, if the Springfield Public School District really, truly, genuinely cared about an environment in which young people, regardless of their political beliefs, felt compelled to have their voices heard through this form of protest, they would be doing some internal investigation, if you will, as to why it is only left-wing students feel comfortable enough to do so. They do a bit of a pause and say, you know what? You know what I've noticed? I've noticed only one political persuasion feels comfortable protesting in support of their cause. Why is that? Are we doing something to make conservative students feel as if they don't have the right to do so, or they don't feel compelled to do so? Is there any self-reflection in the Springfield Public School District as to that? Al, like many of you, the answer is pretty simple. It's because it's run by left-wingers, ultimately, and that doesn't mean that there aren't normal people that are part of the administration and normal people that are part of the staff, but the direction of it clearly is one about indoctrinating young people as to what is worthy of protest versus what's worthy of being protested against. The students know. They don't even have to be told directly. That's how bad the culture has become. You don't even have to specifically direct them. They've been indoctrinated long enough and successfully enough. All students know which perspectives are welcome and which ones aren't. That's why you only see one side of the aisle feel not only comfortable, but celebrated for protesting and walking out of school when it comes to their causes, while the other side of the political spectrum keeps their mouths shut because they know. And while there are and here's the sick thing of it, you would like to think that the people within the Springfield public school systems that are left of center in terms of their mindset, that they would be horrified at that realization, like, oh my gosh, I never realized that this is what we were doing. That's what you would like to think. That's not how they work. They're pleased with this. To them, that sort of hostile environment that sends a message that there is one proper way to think and that diversity of thought is not a positive thing, they don't see that as a failure. They see that as a success. The only failure is the fact that they don't get 100% participation of students with these left-wing activist walkouts. Speaking of, I got some great, I'll play it coming up, audio. So there is a gal who goes by the Founding Baddie, Baddie. And she makes posts on social media. Instagram is where I follow her. And she's from Springfield. I don't know if she currently lives in Springfield, but she's from Springfield. And she recently discovered that one of her former professors at MSU happens to be a school board member, Springfield Public School Board member. And she takes to social media to comment on this, and I want to share it with you coming up because on one hand, it's pretty hilarious, but on the other, it is just a sad state of affairs. It is a sad demonstration of where we are in terms of education, not just public education, but the culture and attitude that has long been prevalent at universities like MSU. So we'll play that coming up. Right now, the latest news update.
The first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 51. Tonight, mostly cloudy with a low around 33. For your Tuesday, partly sunny with a high near 43. And for Wednesday, mostly sunny with a high near 39.
Sarah Myers, everyone.
Thank you. The Pyramid Roofing Company. Over the next couple of days, that snow will start to finally melt off, and that's when you may see some roofing issues. If you experience any types of leaks or drips, maybe yellowing on your ceiling, or your gutters are just malfunctioning, don't go at it alone and don't go with some random door knocker. I want to recommend Josh and his team over at the Pyramid Roofing Company. They are the experts. They use high-quality materials, including ice and water shield, and they do that around the ventilation and the eaves and the valleys, which is where the roof usually fails first. They won't try to upsell you. They'll let you know, hey, it's time for a whole new roof, or if you just need a simple roof repair. So if it is time to have the Pyramid team out to your home, reach out to Josh today. You can find all of the contact information for the Pyramid Roofing Company under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
You know, normally I don't know if you knew this or not, but you probably did. Normally there would be a school board election for Springfield, but there's not because people have just given up trying to run. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah. So nobody was running against the challengers. And I think that's a sad reflection of the establishment having successes in
That is sad.
in preventing just parents and average people who actually want to see some positive changes taking place. I mean, Dr. M is the one holdout there, and God bless her for it. But it's almost like with city council, you just increasingly see average citizens say, what's the point? And with the last few elections, the big money establishment folks getting, like Smart in there, which, the wife of former MSU president, and you have a former teacher, part of the establishment. You've got Huff, part of the, just all of these rubber stampers who always run on, well, I'm just, I'm not going to vote lockstep with, and then they always vote lockstep when it comes down to it. And so it's sad. And the fact that you didn't have the encouragement from anybody within the realm of education saying, hey, it's always great to have some competition, fresh ideas. This is, it's this unfortunate scenario that they create in which, on one hand, I completely understand why people whose number one goal is just the best education for children say, well, clearly they're not going to let that happen. And so what's the point? But on the other hand, that's exactly what they want. They want people to just give up and to go back to the days pre-COVID, before people knew what was going on in the schools, and just let the elites handpick the people that are going to be on the school board. And then you see just a continued decline in education. And obviously that's not something that is isolated to Springfield. We've seen it all across the country. And, it's just a real shame. Well, so there's a gal who she's getting some increased popularity online, I believe. And I think she still lives in Springfield. I don't know. I've not communicated with her. Don't know. And she went to MSU. She goes by the founding baddie, Baddie, and she was apparently a student at MSU at one point, and apparently a student of one of the Springfield School Board members, who also is a professor over at MSU, and that's Dr. Sharita Thomas Tate. And this apparently, based off her experience as a student, was quite a surprise to see that she would be on the school board. And I wanted to play for you one of her latest postings on social media about that.
I'm looking at the members of Springfield Public Schools Board of Education, or just the Springfield Board of Education, and I'm like, oh my God, why do they have these people on the Board of Education? One of them was literally my college professor whenever I went to Missouri State and was majoring in communication sciences and disorders. And she was a terrible professor, very unorganized, never prepared for class, super difficult to get in with office hours, missed a lot of the office hours appointments that I made with her, like super inconsistent with grading, terrible at grading, listed African American vernacular English or whatever as a literal speech disorder, and like something that you take money from people and their family to teach their kid how to not speak slang, essentially. Like, that is not the same as a literal communication disorder, but whatever. Like, I don't understand how this woman is on school board. Like, if you are on school board and operating anywhere near the way that you were when you were my professor, please, I hope that you have an assistant or sought some kind of help, because I'm like, I wouldn't trust her to know anything, honestly. Like, everything is opinion based. And then to go back to the Missouri State thing, whenever we went to the dean, I just thought about this. Me and a lot of other students went to the dean to talk about her, and the dean said, well, she looks good for the university because of all the things she's involved in. Yes, that's exactly the problem. She's involved in so many things, she's slacking on the professor end. Like, why am I paying you to be taught by her and she can't even teach? Like, it was absolutely wild. One of the semesters, she gave us a syllabus that was completely from a different semester. And like that, I don't care about. If you're teaching the same class and it's the same timeline, cool. But at least change the dates. Like, this is spring 2021. Why am I looking at due dates for a fall like 2020 syllabus? It never made any sense to me. The woman is just wildly scatterbrained and can't keep anything together. So I'm concerned that she's on school board, to be honest.
Does any of this surprise you at
No,
all?
not at all. Not at all.
Now, this gal should run for school board. I'd love to see that. By the way, before those of you on the left start playing the race card, the former student there herself is a person of color. So you can't, well, I guess the left call black people racist all the time if they happen to have diverse perspectives on things. But she is a person of color. I mean, all of that is, honestly, that's why she's on the school board. Those are the type of people that are easily controlled. And ironically, they're the people who think that they're the least controlled. They really fancy themselves as being these strong, independent people, but they are easily manipulated. And And so when some perhaps rhetorical question is asked, is like, well, how does somebody like that end up on the school? It's because of those personality traits, which is sad. It's also sad, and then you look on the other side of the coin, what she experienced as a student in her assessment, her personal experience, her, as they like to say, truth on the left. It was problematic enough, a number of students went to the dean. Like, she's such a bad teacher. And the response was, well, she looks good because, she does a lot of things in the community. Apparently, the fact that she wasn't good at actually teaching wasn't relevant. This is a person that people pay in order to be taught for, like that. That's her. You would think that would be the priority. But is this not, again, typical of culture in the left? Results aren't what matter. Good teacher. What are you talking about? No. It's the label. It's just the resume. It's the way it makes us, quote, look. Not whether you actually get a good education, you fools. What a devastating perspective and reality. You've got this gal, used to be a student, just checking out school board to see, and then is horrified to see, because of her experience, like, is that really the professor that I had at MSU, that total and complete joke and failure? The one that the school was like, maybe she's not a good teacher, but hey, she looks good. And we just can't figure out why it is that we continue to have losses in our education in this country in terms of meaningful results. I started following this particular online commentator because of another political online commentator that I began following. And I know some of you, she's really gained some traction because I've had a number of you say, hey, do you follow or do you know this Heather Overstreet, who is actually from the Columbia area? She's from Central Missouri, and she has taken to doing some commentary online. I think part of the effectiveness is a lot of it's common sense, but it is also bringing to light a number of things that are going on in local communities, Columbia being one of them, that most normal people don't necessarily know about. But it's also done in a very digestible and commentary in sort of short snippets, which is pretty effective. And is the sort of thing people will sit through because you get the thought, you get the idea, you get everything behind it, and you don't have to spend 20 minutes doing it. It might be 90 seconds or so. And so the effectiveness of that, well, somehow she ended up befriending the founding baddie, and they posted some things together, and that's how I found the other one. So anyway, if you're on Instagram and you like following people that have kind of short snippets of insightful info that is intelligent and common sense, and here in Missouri, one against Central Missouri, and the other, I think from the Springfield area, Heather Overstreet is one, and then the founding baddie is the other on Instagram. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. The two social media, I don't know if you'd call them influencers, I don't know what they call themselves, that I was talking about in the last segment, we will get their Instagram profiles up,
Their
on
handles
their
or whatever they're
handles.
called.
So if you want to follow them or check them out, then you can do so instead of you kind of having to search and be like, was this the one or is that the one? So I'll make sure I'm going to shoot those over to Sarah, and then she can get those up. Sarah Myers.
Thank you. Foreman Mechanical Heating and Air wanted to read a review from Molly. Molly wrote, excellent service. Foreman always answers the phone and always has the problem fixed and warranties honored. They get here quick and they're always polite and they do such a good job. Thank you so much. And that is what you get with Foreman Mechanical Heating and Air. Just high quality people, high quality work. And while the weather is a little warmer this week, now is the time to schedule them out if you have been experiencing any type of heating issues over the last couple of weeks. You can reach out to Russell, schedule that appointment today, and you can find all of the contact information for Foreman Mechanical Heating and Air under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
Trying to find, I sent you one.
Okay.
I was trying to quickly find the other here. I don't really follow that many people. All right, well, I'll send you, I also sent you that parody ad.
Oh, okay,
that I
good.
was
Good.
telling you about. Yeah, I'll send you the Heather Overstreet one here during the, oh, wait, here it is. Let me find, I'm going to, oops, don't want to do that. Let's see.
And I will put these up, ksgf.com, in the must-read headlines, and then I'll put them on our social as well.
Share this profile. Yeah, I'd like to at one point, I think, have in some capacity one or both of them to do something with them because they're getting followings.
Do you want me to reach out?
Well, let's hold on because, and here's why, and I guess I can go ahead and just talk about this. There's no reason not to. Hold on, I'm still trying to send this to you. You know, everyone under the sun does video podcasting, and of course, we have this show in the form of video podcast when we're in studio. But we've talked about, and this has been some time. Is there something else we can do? But the one thing we didn't want to do is something for the sake of doing it. Like, oh, well, everyone's doing it, so that means we got to do it, and we'll just figure out what we're going to do. We did want to do something that people would actually want to watch and be meaningful. And so that's something we've been developing. And just to give you an idea of some of the different thoughts, is maybe longer type form interviews potentially, but of stuff that's actually going to be of interest. But also maybe doing overflow stuff. There are a lot of times when the show is done and there were things that I really wanted to get to. I always have content that I don't get to. I don't think I ever run out of anything. I end up tossing aside things. Sometimes I roll it over to the next day, and then by the end of the week, I'm like, well, this is 5 days old, never got to it. And so the thought of, you know, on one of those days, if it was something that I felt was really important, but we just ran out of time, doing a video podcast of sort of an overflow hour, and not fully an hour, but just however time it takes, how much time it takes. And so anyhow, that's something that we're working on and developing so that it's not just something else that's floating out there that people don't really care about. And point being is I was thinking that they may be a good fit for something like that to sit down and you know, perhaps have them on air as well. And they may have no interest in it. They might be like, who are you? Which is fine, of course. But it would give them an opportunity maybe to be introduced to some people who aren't familiar with them, and just, you know, all of us sort of networking together and sharing one another is giving you the opportunity to get in tune with more people, some of which may be more active outside of on air. I think that's one of the things that Heather Overstreet is looking to do, though she's not in this immediate area, again, up around central Missouri, is starting to get citizens more involved and active through events and so forth. And you know, and she's younger also, which I think is something that the movement definitely can benefit from, as we've seen a shift from once upon a time, the left completely owned the younger generations, but some of that has shifted, and a lot of that is people believe, and I think there's something to this, the way that the Democrats went totally authoritarian when it came to COVID, and just young people seeing this authoritarian dictator mentality that people on the left would have only when it comes to their goals and their desires, like everyone get vaccinated, but then being inconsistent in that application when it was something they didn't want. And for a lot of people, that really drove them away from the left, and one of the reasons that I think increasingly younger people are becoming active and involved and seeing the Orwellian ways of the left. Did you get those?
I did.
See,
yeah.
okay, very good. And we'll have those up on on.
I'll put them up in your must-read headlines,
okay.
and then I'll put them up on social as well.
Okay, excellent. Oh, all right, we have traffic. Didn't realize I was going really late here. Lost track of what I was doing, which happens increasingly. But what are you going to do? Traffic update, I'm Nick Reed.
Springfield's Talk 1041, the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by J&S Automotive. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 51. Tonight, mostly cloudy with a low around 33. For your Tuesday, partly sunny with a high near 43. And for Wednesday, mostly sunny with a high near 39.
Any home loan needs you have, I've recommended for years. I want a great homeloan.com. It's been, I don't know, a decade or so since I first utilized the services. And, of course, Don Carricker at the time was head of the helm, and he's retired in the last couple of years or so. And Alex and Anthony Carricker have taken over and done extremely well, obviously, with their team. And I remember I was actually driving to Florida when Don had called and shared with me, hey, here's a number of different options that we have for you. And then he noted that there was one, I don't know if it was a credit, something I owed money on, and he noted that it was like $120. If you made that payment, then that would actually bring your credit score up a bit because of the debt to income ratio or the debt ratio on credit cards, or I forget now, it's been some time. But I think back to the drop in interest rate that resulted in, and the amount of money I've saved over time for what was like $120, $200 of a payment. And you think, how many people would have caught that, would have done the math on it? And you don't always get that level of service. And then it was years later, they proactively contacted me saying, hey, refinance, and we did some numbers, and you can actually shorten the term of your loan and lower your monthly payments at the same time. And again, that isn't the sort of deal that you always get. And so they're very proactive. They constantly, even after you go through the process, check out what's going on with you to see if there is some sort of better deal that you can get at that given moment. And it's just one of the many reasons that I recommend the Carrickers and their team when it comes to any refinancing or home loans or reverse mortgages. And it all starts at iwantagreathomeloan.com. It's that simple to remember. There was a release of some more Epstein files, and the left has taken some of the information and, without verifying it, of course, have run with it. Oh, here's proof. Donald Trump was auctioning off children. I kid you not. That's and he raped a 13-year-old girl at his golf course and would sell girls to be raped and so this is, and by the way, this is the danger or the damage or the result of releasing everything, because you're going to have so much information that isn't true. And that works against Republicans and conservatives, because whenever there is information that is inflammatory against someone on the left and it turns out not to be true, then Republicans stop spreading it. And they tend to be much more cautious at any sort of allegation because they recognize, well, if this turns out to not be true, this is going to be embarrassing, we'll lose credibility. But the left doesn't operate that way. They don't care if it's true or not. They just take it and they use it as proof of something. And so the reality is, because of the complete lack of any sort of moral compass and honesty or desire for the truth by the left, the release of all of this information can work against Trump and work against Republicans and conservatives. It's because of the way they operate. And so no matter how absurd something may be, it ends up getting released. Now, obviously, and here's the thing. Still, there is a lot of information that isn't released because they are, and this is what they say, that they are going to great lengths to make sure they do not reveal the names of any of the victims or any information that could make it easy or possible for someone to determine who the victim is. And part of the reason for that is because then they could turn around and sue. I mean, even if you don't care about harming the victim again, a tremendous number of these victims settled for tremendous amounts of money because they didn't want it to go public. They did not want to go to trial. And that's not an uncommon situation. Oftentimes, someone who is a victim of a crime, particularly of a sexual nature, there's shame or embarrassment that comes along with it, though it shouldn't, but this is just human nature. But at the same time, they want the individual punished or those that they feel is responsible punished. And so they will settle for a tremendous amount of money, thinking, okay, well, at least there's some harm here to someone that was involved. But at the same time, I don't have to relive this by testifying in court. I don't have to deal with reporters standing outside my home. And God forbid, if you're accusing somebody on the left, you don't have to worry about being called a liar and a whore, which is what the American people, particularly female victims of sexual assault, observed the Democrats do during the 90s when Bill Clinton was being accused of women from everything from sexual assault to rape. Those women were turned into whores. They were turned into liars. We were told that they were crazy. And so because of that, a lot of female victims do not want to go public. And the Justice Department is doing what they can in order to make sure that none of those revelations occur. And there's trillions of pages, and there is a short-staffed component to this because the Senate is still, with the Democrats doing some filibuster stuff, holding up a lot of appointees that would help facilitate the speed at which this information gets released. Some of the files that were most recently released have very inflammatory accusations against Donald Trump. Now, if this were about covering up for Donald Trump, why would they release that? Why? That doesn't make sense. Now, of course, the logical answer here is this isn't about covering up for Donald Trump, particularly given that, let's be honest, none of this would even be occurring if it were not for Donald Trump. And as much as this has become to him an annoying distraction, the fact of the matter is, the reason that it is even occurring is because he's the one who was really pushing the envelope on this, saying that this needed to happen. So according to and listen, again, the left is running with this as if it's truth because this is what they do. But one of the, some of this stuff, it's okay, it wouldn't be funny if it was true, but it's just so absurd that it makes it somewhat funny because it's just absurd. Now, one of the accusations that was made, or this was in one of the files, and the file said, quote, that the agent, quote, spoke with caller who identified redacted as a friend. Let's see. There was the online complainant reported she was a victim and witness to a sex trafficking ring at Donald Trump's golf course in Rancho Palos Verdes, California, between 1995 and 96, for which Ghislaine Maxwell was the resident madam and broker of sex parties. So apparently she wasn't actually at Epstein Island. That's not where she was a resident. No, all of that isn't true. She actually was a resident at Donald Trump's golf course in Rancho Palos Verdes between 95 and 96, in which Donald Trump had her running these sex ring operations of children. Now, that is one of the bits of information that is circulating by the left as proof that Donald Trump is a child rapist. Now, part of the reality, however, is that this particular individual that reported it had, according to the report, a tremendous amount of psychological issues, was determined to not be credible, and, oh yeah, there's this, that golf resort didn't even open until 2006, a decade after the person claimed that Donald Trump was running sex ring operations out of it. So clearly absurd and untrue. Factually proven to be false. What was one of my other favorite? Let me find it here. It's not this one. Okay. The complainant reported being threatened by Trump's then head of security that if she ever talked of what went on there or who she saw at the resort that didn't exist for another 10 years, that he would, quote, end up as fertilizer for the back nine holes like the other C words. But that's not. Okay, here. So, quote, Jeffrey Epstein would bring children to Mar-a-Lago and Donald Trump would auction them off. So apparently at Mar-a-Lago, Jeffrey Epstein was bringing kids, and Donald Trump was playing auctioneer. Like he'd bring up, here's an 8-year-old girl, and he'd do the full-blown Billy Long auctioneering thing, and he's auctioning off little kids right there at Mar-a-Lago. With that particular complaint, the person who left it anonymously left no contact information, but it's clearly true. some of this stuff is so hilariously wrong with such clear and stark inaccurate information. Unfortunately, however, again, with the left, this makes no difference to them whatsoever because the truth is irrelevant. Only their quest for power. Springfield's Talk 1041, I'm Nick Reed. I think it may have been exactly a week ago. It was somewhere around that time I noted that you were beginning to see left-wing activists bringing their children to some of these disruptions to try and block ICE from carrying out their law enforcement duties. And a lot of people, they were like, why are they bringing their kids? Well, to use them as human shields. The tactics that have been taken from the left are just page by page from Hamas. Hamas, one of the ways that they operate in terms of public relations and marketing is to put some of their most vulnerable in harm's way, and that would be to have what were known as, these known military installations to the Israelis, and then put a nursery on top of it. So when the Israelis would take out the military operation, they could say, look, they're killing children, they're targeting nurseries. And that is what the left has been doing when it comes to these ICE operations. And thus far, they have manipulated a couple of adults into putting themselves in harm's way for this very purpose, and it's playing out the same way that it does with Hamas. But then people began to notice that they were bringing kids, and it was for the same purpose. Hence, the following story: Portland mayor tells all ICE agents to resign after girl among protesters doused with chemical agents. And this story is about some girl, 8, 10 years old, in the middle of a protest, with the fighting and rioting going on, and then tear gas or pepper spray, whatever, gets deployed, and then the girl, because she's in the mix, gets it in her eyes. So, of course, who gets condemned? Not the parents, who are using their child as a human shield, but the ICE agents, who are now tear gassing kids. It is the Hamas playbook being used